Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Iowa Aging Summit panel on advocacy and activism in older adulthood. We will have our conversation today moderated by a professional moderator. Shuva Rahim is here to facilitate our conversation with some older folks from across Iowa who may or may not consider themselves to be older, but we have determined that they're better than 50 years old. So Shuva is a creative person, multidimensional, who is passionate about educating adult learners. She specifically works in the technology space by facilitating software use for faculty, staff, and administrators at higher ed institutions. She also has this great new podcast called Untrained Wisdom. And she talks to ordinary people who are 55 and older, who have redefined the paradigm of what it means to become older. And she also talks with some industry professionals whose expertise guides seasoned generations, as she calls them, to live more fulfilling lives. So if you're an older adult or you have maturing loved ones, which is pretty much all of us, and you welcome inspiration and ideas on leading a more enriching life, you will love Untrained Wisdom, and I think you'll also enjoy this panel. So Shuva, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much, Jen, for that introduction. Like Jen said, my name is Shuva, and I have this podcast called Untrained Wisdom. And I'm really excited about this panel today. So thank you to our guests for being part of this, especially in the midst of COVID and recovery from our recent storm. So we'll just go ahead and get started. So I want to start by asking each of you to briefly introduce yourselves. In your introduction, if you could include your name, your hometown, what you're doing currently, and why it's important. So we'll start with Art.
My name is Art Roche, and I live in Dubuque. I'm 72, so whether you consider that old enough to be here, I don't know. But here I am, and what I'm doing, well, I retired from my job after 47 years working at a hospital in Dubuque, and now I'm working as a volunteer with mainly Marshallese people that came here to the U.S. from the Marshall Islands, and they have significant health problems, and since my background was in healthcare. I wasn't a direct provider, I was more of an administrator, but that's kind of what's needed, someone that can kind of pull things together, get grants, find money, organize people. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. But it gives me an opportunity to work very closely and directly with these people. And that's been great. It's opened up a whole new world for me. And then that opened the door to working with other migrant populations in Dubuque. So I'm also volunteer with a group of Guatemalan young people, and I've been tutoring, I've been driving them to ICE appointments, which is kind of interesting, and to doctor's appointments and dental appointments and so on. So that's a quick summary. Is that enough for now?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Anne, we'll go with you next.
I grew up in Houston, but I don't call it a hometown. My name is Ann Christensen. Just moved to a retirement residence in Coralville, but I've been in the area for about 15 years now. I'm a graduate of the university here. I was born in the Rio Grande Valley and had Latina caregivers while my mother and dad worked on a newspaper there. They were from Iowa, also my parents, both grads of the UI. And so when I was 4, the family moved back to Iowa, to Keokuk, where my grandparents had a jack-of-all-trades helper who was Black, a man named Howard. And Howard took care of us, eventually 4 kids. And he was probably the earliest exposure we had to Black American. And I think those early exposures must have imprinted on me because we were very fond of Howard. While I was at the U, UI, I participated in a protest to get Pete Seeger to come sing on campus, but because he had been investigated by the House Un-American Activities Committee, the university wouldn't allow him on campus, so we found an alternative venue, and that was my first time to see Pete Seeger. Not the last. After I graduated, I went to New York City and worked for Time Magazine, but there I had a very irregular schedule, so I volunteered as English as a second language teacher on the Lower East Side. They were mostly Cuban immigrants. And I also volunteered at a church in Harlem, which at an organization called Operation Crossroads Africa. Went from there eventually, after bumming around Europe for a while, to Indianapolis, where I worked for a newspaper, and joined in civil rights protests there. Met my husband and married, and our first living was in Stamford, Connecticut, and I became a member of the Fair Housing Board, and he was an outreach librarian for the library there and was a member of NAACP and organized inter diversities. But then Minnesota, where we lived for 30 years, and participated in Iraq war marches on the Capitol and Tarzan marches on the Capitol at St. Paul, and finally retired to Iowa, member of the 100 Grannies, which has been involved in fighting the Keystone XL pipeline and the DAPL pipeline, and I've been arrested twice, once in Washington, D.C., and last time in Lee County down at the Mississippi protests.
Thank you, Anne. Joan, you're next.
I was born in Northern Kentucky, and so was my husband. We got married in 1969 and then started traveling around the country. Tom was drafted and went to Vietnam. We moved to North Carolina. He went to physical therapy school. We came from Philadelphia here in 1981, and he was hired by the physical therapy department. I had an English degree, so by that time we had 2 children. So I was home with them, and then I worked at a hospital where I worked when I was in college as well, what I did. And I went back to school and I got an aging study certificate. So that's where I met Merce Burns Coog, and we were classmates together in the aging studies program. And I always felt that I wanted to work with older adults and empower and connect them with purpose. And so I started working at Elder Services in 1985 when it was an agency of 3 people. And they help people stay in their homes as long as possible with chore service. And we acquired the grant for Retired and Senior Volunteer Program in 1990. So I built that program over the next 40 years. The purpose was to connect people with activities, volunteer activities that kept them connected and useful in the community, and purpose. And we intergenerational programs were really a big passion of mine, getting people into schools, helping kids read, speech skills. We had a Speak Up program in schools where kids gave their first formal speech in 5th grade. And most of the time you did that in college. So they were very proud of themselves after they gave their first formal speech, and ended up very much excelling in junior high and high school because they had that experience. And we connected people with all kinds of volunteer opportunities within the community. Because I like people and purpose, I joined the Grannies a couple years ago because I felt very passionate about a lot of things that Anne's done over her life, but I wasn't right where Peter, Paul, and Mary were our first date. And all of their music was part of us growing up. So I feel very connected to something that really makes a difference in people's lives with climate change and all of the recycling and a lot of the things to educate people into making a better world.
All right, well, thank you so much. You all have such illustrious lives and just years of activism and community involvement. It's really admirable. My next question is just kind of leading into that in terms of the present day, but we'll start with Anne on this one. How did you become an activist with 100 Grannies? How did that happen?
I had a friend who every time I talked to her, I talked about the importance of the environment and what was happening. And this was about 10 years ago. And this was Barbara Schlachter. And I know that a lot of people probably watching this knew Barbara. She was an Episcopal priest and a strong activist in a lot of areas. And when she had grandchildren, she realized what kind of world we were going to be leaving to our grandkids and their kids. And she came up with the idea of forming 100grannies.org. The name comes from her thinking of putting 100 grandmothers on a railroad track in front of a coal train and stopping the train. Well, that was early on, and we've gone far beyond that. Well, we never did stop a train by our bodies, but we are still trying to stop coal trains, and that's come a long way. Use of coal is going down all the time, but we are opposed to fossil fuels in any form or variety and in what they bring to the environment. And so that includes plastics. We work against plastics. It includes pipelines. That's a really biggie, and we did a lot with pipelines in the beginning. All the ways that we can improve or turn around what's happening to the environment, and it's almost too late. I've been really enjoying all the publicity about women's suffrage, and I have to remind people, women's suffrage took 70 years before they even got the first women the vote. And now we don't have 70 years. We don't have 10 years left before the world is permanently wrecked. And so everybody needs to get involved with saving our environment.
Thank you for that. Joan, what about you? How did you become involved with 100 Grannies?
I knew Barbara as a volunteer because we did some environmental things with the city, and that was one of our areas where we matched volunteers. So we cleaned the bike paths and something like they're doing today, chewing up the wood all along the path. And I knew her for a while, and she kept talking about the 100 Grannies. And I've always been interested in just like what Anne was talking about, our grandchildren need a planet that is going to sustain them and not be too hot for them to live in, too unbearable for them to live in.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, Joan, for sharing that perspective. Art, your turn.
Okay. Actually, my business card, my post retirement business card describes me. I describe myself as community organizer, and that has certain connotations because that's how Barack Obama described himself, and a lot of people reviled him for being a community organizer. So I said, well, that sounds like what I want to do. So anyway, going way back to college times, I guess. I could go further than that, but I won't. College, I grew up in college during the time of the Vietnam War and the protests against the war, the moratorium, all that kind of stuff. So I was and am a conscientious objector. So that involved really thinking through and writing down my beliefs and defending them to my draft board. But then as time went on, I was working at Mercy Medical Center, first as my alternate service, which you need to do if you're a conscientious objector. You have to do some other kind of work for minimum wage for a couple of years. And so that's what I was doing. And then I stayed at Mercy and basically stayed there the rest of my adult working life. During that time, I had an opportunity to be exposed to needs in the community. I was working at first in areas like physical therapy, occupational therapy, working with mental health patients, and one of the things that we did was organize a curb cut movement. In those days, there were no curb cuts anywhere. And so people who were trying to navigate the city in a wheelchair, especially in a wheelchair, would have trouble getting from the sidewalk down to the street and crossing streets and moving from one block to the next. So, one corner at a time, we negotiated with the city to get curb cuts installed. And that was around the time that some federal legislation had occurred to make that mandatory, but it was in such a way that only when that curb was going to be demolished anyway because of street work or something. So it could go another 20 years without getting repaired. So we were activists in that regard, and we were also categorizing buildings as to their ability for people to navigate within the building and even enter the building in wheelchairs or other handicap accessibility features, that kind of stuff. And so, we were, and I don't have a handicap myself. I don't have a physical handicap, but I had friends who did. And so I kind of decided that was something I wanted to get behind. Life intervened with children and all the things that go along with raising a family. But while we were doing that, we were paying attention to what are we teaching these kids, and so we got involved with our kids in protests, but they were just things that we could take children to. We also hosted international families that were passing through. There was something called the Peace Cruise, where a boat was coming down the Mississippi River full of people from Russia, and we hosted a Russian sports writer at our house overnight for 2 nights, I think, and took him around to all the things in the city, and learned a lot about him, and he learned a lot about us. So we were kind of doing some international diplomacy. Partway through my time at Mercy, I had the opportunity to go for 2 weeks in Palestine and help plan the rebuilding of a hospital that had been damaged from war. And as it turned out, the work that we did was kind of futile because we were there during a time when things looked more promising, kind of between intifadas, I think they're called, and then things got worse again, and the building never really got reopened again. But it was a fascinating opportunity for me to understand the plight of the people, especially the Palestinian people, but the people on both sides of that very difficult situation in the Mideast. Then moving up to September 11th, 2001. That night, we were I was aware of all the concern and worries that people were expressing about retaliation, that we needed to do something about this. We need to take some kind of action. And people in my arena, in the peace and justice arena, were saying, no, we need to find a way to change the way people are thinking about this. And we founded an organization called Dubuque Peace and Justice, which has been going since then, and we've had many events and speakers and talks and weekly vigils, almost weekly vigils since that first time around. That brings me up to the work that I'm doing currently, now post-retirement, with the Marshall Islanders and the Guatemalan refugees in Dubuque. The need for finding a way to establish justice for everyone. If people are hungry, if someone's hungry, then we're all hungry. If someone is being mistreated, we're all being mistreated. I remember bumper stickers in the Iraq War protest that I had, and maybe some of you had. It said, "I have family in Iraq," and I didn't have blood relatives, but we all have brothers and sisters everywhere. That was kind of the thinking, and so that's kind of the basis of my social activism.
My next question actually is in regards to just kind of comparing your work today versus maybe 20, 30 years ago. Your lives are all probably a little bit different then, but I'm going to start with Joan on this one. But how is being an activist at this time in your life different than if you've been doing the same thing, say, a generation ago, 20, 30 years ago?
I think I'm a lot the same in many ways, because I always had passion for what I did by understanding who new people were when they walked in the door. When I was interviewing them, they came in from anywhere in the country, sometimes out of the country, and I wanted to find something for them that would increase their satisfaction with life, as you would say, by connecting them either with kids, with seniors, with nonprofit organizations. And a lot of people said I was very passionate about what I did. I guess I was just very sincere about making sure that the match was perfect for them. And then recently I just thought of myself as more of an activist, because I can't let some of this stuff go by. It's just very, we always were very interested in the people that, the little people that, or the people that didn't have all the opportunities that we've had. I'm connected with the Senior Center, with their Black Lives Matter book group things, and I find just learning more and more and more about people that you didn't know about. I think it's just now we have a lot more time. We do a lot of exercise and biking, but you have more time to devote to things that you really feel passionate about.
Thank you. Anne, well, we'll go to you next.
30 years ago, well, I'm approaching very close to 84 now. So 30 years ago, in my 50s, I think I know more now. I think you never keep learning. And I look back at my university days, or high school, or even New York, and you think you're mature and you think you've got all the answers, but you don't. You don't have the answers, and you keep learning the answers no matter how old you get. And I think it's really important to be open-minded and stay abreast of the news and understand what's going on in the world, not just right around me. It's a never-ending chain.
Thank you, Anne. And those are good words of wisdom for anybody at any age, especially me. So thanks. Art, same question to you. How has your work as a community organizer at this time in your life different than if you had been doing it 30 years earlier?
Sure. Well, I have to kind of step back a few months to pre-COVID, because that in this time right now, I'm really restricted. I'm you know, I think anyone over whatever age, 55, 60, is in that age range where they have to be more careful than the rest of the population. So, you know, some of the stuff that I was doing prior to that, like I was really enjoying driving Guatemalan people around to their appointments and stuff, and spending time with their families, and actually babysitting the kids while the parents were in the doctor's office, you know, that kind of stuff. Can't do that now. So, and it's going to be some weeks or months before I'm able to do that. So I miss that. But going back prior to that, for the 3 years since retirement, of course, and I think Joan said this, that I just have more time. I have more time to devote to. I have more time to distribute among the things that I want to distribute than I had before, because my job was claiming a good chunk of each day. But during the time that I was working, that was the time when I was really being kind of exposed to all this stuff, and was, you know, it was kind of like I was perusing the menu for 47 years, and then suddenly, you know, the banquet doors open, and here I am, you know. So what do you want to do? And because I had skills in organizing and stuff of that nature, I was, you know, I was being asked by people to join boards and do things of that nature. And I'm on several boards, but I only join a board if I know that it's a working situation where we're going to actually be accomplishing something. I don't want to be just on a board to, you know, to have my name on the board, which I don't think would be worth that much anyway. But I want it to be a situation where I'm accomplishing something. The fact that I can get up now and plan my entire day around the things that I've been describing, you know, I can make those commitments and know that I have a free calendar to accomplish those things, and I can look back each week and see, you know, has this been working out for me? Am I able to spend the time that I really wanted to spend and dedicate it to the things that I think are going to be useful and important? And right now I'm able to do that. I've also learned that you know, I'm losing, I think the number is 10,000 brain cells a day, and I mean, we all are. You know, so I'm looking to younger people to join the work that we're doing. I find that most of the organizations I'm involved with are people who are in my age category, and because they're retired, and younger people are still, you know, raising families and still occupied with other aspects of their life. So it's really important to me that whatever group I'm involved with, that there's a mix of age levels of people, so that there's always a new batch of young people getting excited and getting passionate about the same things.
Art, I think you raised a good point there, and all of you did, with the time commitment that you have now versus when, you know, you were working, raising families, but also having that involvement by younger generations. And I want to follow up with that, Art, with you. What do you think is a good way, or is there an effective way to get more younger people involved in the causes that you care about, especially given the challenges of them, you know, working, raising families? Is there a way to do that? Is there an effective way to do that from your standpoint?
Well, I'll just say a couple of things. One is that I think just sort of having an open invitation and expecting people to respond to that may not work as well with people who are already occupied with the things that you just described: raising families, seeking their own education, that kind of stuff. So sometimes you need to specifically ask a specific person. I would probably just have a conversation with that person and tell them that, you know, I think you've got some possible interest in this area, and I wonder if you'd be just willing to come to one meeting and see what you think, or let me spend a little more time with you about this and help you understand why why I think this would be such a good fit for you. Just seeing what I'm seeing. I think that's one way. Asking people. And often, as a community organizer, okay, I think you don't just sit there and wait for people to come and let you organize them.
And do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I want to build on what Art said, because he's hit the nail on the head. You have to ask people. Sending out requests for volunteers is not going to get anybody involved. People don't like to, by and large, I find people don't like to volunteer unless they are specifically asked for a specific job. And then they jump in and they become enthusiastic, and then they bring other friends in. And I think Art had it right. You have to ask. The other thing I think we have to model, the older people have to model for the younger people. I would really like to see my kids and grandkids more involved in these sorts of things. But I know how busy they are. But we did take our daughter and her two kids to a protest in Washington, D.C. when the kids were early teens, and I think it made an impression. And we, our grandson, who was in City High, attended the Greta Thunberg event. And those things make impressions where he might not be active right now, but as he matures and as his sister matures, I hope that his sister is getting into activism. She's been really involved in Black Lives Matter. So, you wait and you hope, and eventually, usually they get there. One of my pet peeves, though, is when you're looking for a volunteer for something, people tend to judge for that volunteer. You have somebody in mind, and then somebody says, oh, she doesn't have time, she's da, da, da. Well, we can't decide if she has time. We have to ask her, and she can tell me if she doesn't have time. But a lot of times you could be surprised. And if it's the right project and the right ask, you'll get them.
Joan, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's what I did in my career. I asked people to do things and connected them with what they enjoyed doing. And you're right, you do have to ask people, and you can't just assume that they're too busy or that they're not interested. My granddaughter lives in Michigan, and she's 16 and just got her license. And she talked about 51 minutes one day and talked about Black Lives Matter and the Z generation and all the people that are not going to be prejudiced against LGBT. She said, and she just went on and on and on. I am encouraged by the youth that have been out on the streets. They're all younger than us, and I'm very encouraged that people are taking charge, and they're very interested in climate as well as Black Lives Matter and a lot of the issues that they're facing. And like Emily said, this is going to be our world, and we need to take charge of it. And I think in schools and COVID is really stopping a lot of that activity too, which is really too bad, because the kids are just not being able to connect with each other like they would. And I also have the Mark Twain quote that Anne was talking about travel and what that does for you. And it opens up your world. It makes your world so much different than this little corner that a lot of people are in, and then they judge by way of their little corner of the world. And travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our world need it sorely. On these accounts, broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one's little corner of the earth, all in one's lifetime. That's been a quote of mine that I've had on the refrigerator because we did a lot of traveling and people thought we were connecting with people in the Eastern Europe that we found very enriched by the education and the contacts that we made. And a lot of people just assume you're over there sitting on the beach somewhere when you're traveling instead of really working with people, and really the work with them is a lot more satisfying than sitting on a beach and reading a book. That's just not what we do. So.
Well, I have one final question for all of you, and we'll start with Joan on this one. So what message does it send to people of your generation and also younger generations when they see someone like you being as involved as you are?
Find something you're passionate in, and it gives you purpose in life. And it makes it worthwhile. Your days are worthwhile. And you're connected with people, and you're meeting new people all the time. We're just meeting I met Anne and I met Art. So there's so many people to meet in this world. So, and I met you.
Yeah. Anne, I know I've asked you this question before because we had our interview a few weeks ago, but same question, what message does it send to people of your generation and younger when they see someone as active as you are?
Well, having just moved into a retirement place, even though the virus has us pretty locked down, I'm not meeting many people, but I see a lot of opportunities here for getting more people involved. I met a woman at lunch several years ago. She had retired and found Iowa City so boring that she went back to work for her husband's business. And it just shocked me. I could not imagine finding Iowa City area boring when there are so many things to do and so much to volunteer for. It was a revelation that somebody would think about that. And I think here in these retirement facilities, there are all kinds of able people looking for things to do, and they need to be shown that there are things worthwhile and that they are not too old to continue to help people.
Perfect.
Had something,
Joan, you had something else?
We had a pen pal program going before the school shut down. So there were a lot of pen pals going from the second, third, and fourth grade of the schools to senior pen pals, and then they exchanged letters every month. And it was just, we started that, and it's still going on, but I don't know what's going to happen now with COVID. But people can write letters back and forth, but the kids are not being mentored by the teachers now that much. Maybe that'll be something. I mean, so they can connect with anyone, anywhere. So we'll see about that.
All right, thank you. Art, we'll end with you.
So Shuva, that was a few thousand brain cells ago. Could you repeat the question?
Yeah, certainly. So what message does it send to people of your generation or younger, and younger generations when they see someone like you being involved in their community as much as you are?
Okay, well, let's begin with the first part of that is the people my age. What kind of message does it send to my age peers about that? And it's true that a lot of my friends, they're saying, "Geez, Art, there you go again. You're doing this, you're doing that," and here I am. I mean, they will say, "Here I am, just kind of doing nothing, watching TV," you know, and I guess it sends the message that you don't have to just watch TV. You can, you know, and it's true that I have been fortunate to have good health. I've had no joint problems, which really does create big problems for people around this age that I am now, and so far that hasn't been a problem for me. And I don't think it's because of any action that I've taken. I think it's just good luck on my part. So, you know, that's something. But regardless of all that, I think it's I guess I think it's a positive message that I'm giving to people my age, that you can be more active. You can be as active as you think you can be, and don't judge yourself and say, that's not for me, I can't do that, that's not something I can do, because chances are it is something you can do. It's something you could at least try to do. For the younger people that are younger than me, I think it kind of holds up this possibility for them, and I think possibility is just a wonderful, wonderful thing. We need to know that. I mean, I'm pointing to Anne, the little rectangle on the bottom of my screen here. Pete Seeger, okay, that was a big moment in my life when I only saw Pete Seeger once, and it was at a protest rally at the School of the Americas in Columbus, Georgia, and I thought, and he was he's like 15 years older than me, maybe 10 or 15 years older than me at the time. I don't know how old he was, but I thought, and he was up there, just one guy with his banjo, and leading 10,000 people in a very super slow version of "Where Have All the Flowers Gone?" And it was purposely slow to kind of to aggravate the people on the other side of the fence, and it was a beautiful moment, and I thought, wow, he is such an has been such an inspiration to me, and still continues to be. And he's ancient, and yet there he is, and it just so that worked for me, and I would like to be some kind of inspiration for younger people too, that you can make a difference in your world. You can keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, pay attention, see what needs to be done, see what you can do to do it, and then get up and do it. Okay, that's it. I'm done.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been really fun to listen to all three of you reflect on your experiences and talk about what you're doing right now. I think this will be really informative and inspiring for the people who are watching this. So thank you so much.